Mikey, I need you to do something funny for the intro.
Okay. Titus, you're really cool, and everybody likes you.
How is that? Oh, I see what you did there. Hey guys, welcome to the Search for Awesome podcast. I am Titus.
And I'm Mikey.
This week we're talking about the most high-tech Olympics ever, Casey Neistat interviewing a YouTube bigwig, our favorite podcast,
a cool $100 device for protecting your kids, our new setups. I know we just redid them like last week, but you know, why not? And we're also going to be answering your questions and comments.
So Mikey, how you doing, man?
You know, I'm doing all right.
It's been another late night. So we normally try to record on Mondays, but we keep getting delayed for different reasons. We're not going to talk about that. We'll just start off talking about the Olympics. But anyway, we're not going to talk about the games. We're not going to talk about the medals. We're not going to talk about the athletes. I want to talk about the technology that's going on with the Olympics, because this is the most high-tech Olympics I have ever seen. Did you see the opening ceremony, Mikey?
So having a lack of cable makes it very difficult to watch any of the Olympics. So unfortunately, I haven't been able to watch it yet.
Well, there's this thing called YouTube TV. There's tons of services you could have tried that it wasn't cable to watch it, by the way, just in case you hadn't heard.
I'm going to go on lack of effort here. That's going to be the card I'm going to pull.
Well, that's always the best card to pull, because what are you supposed to say to that? I didn't want to try. I love the Olympics. I mean, it's really cool, but I don't know. I feel like sometimes I go through way too much effort without having cable to try and watch it. That it's just not worth it to me. I'm somewhat into the Olympics. My wife is like super into it, so we got YouTube TV, and that's been a pretty cool experience. YouTube TV is kind of awesome. I'll be honest, unlimited DVR, and it works really well, and it works on a lot of devices. So I definitely like that. But let's talk about like the high-tech side of this. So in the opening ceremony, they did some incredible things. I don't know if you heard about any of this, Mikey, but just mind-blowing, awesome stuff. First off, they had augmented reality. So there were parts of the ceremony where only people who were watching it on television could see what was happening. And there was this one part where like I was watching it. I was like, what is happening? How are they doing this? And then the announcer mentions that this was their new augmented reality thing. It was like this globe thing that they kind of put around all the performers and stuff. And it was like, I don't know, it was like little dots and like pretty lights and stuff. And it was just floating and suspending in air. I was just like, what is going on? And it was just augmented reality. It was really awesome. As part of the opening ceremony, there was thousands of drones that had lights on them that would actually create images in the air. These drones would talk to each other and form images. So they first started off with a snowboarder, and then later it worked its way into the Olympic rings in midair. Just see in midair.
No, wait a minute. How does this work? I mean, do they have like a program that controls all these together? Or do they have like just hundreds of pilots standing there with their controllers all somehow in sync together?
I'll tell you how it works. Intel, because there was a commercial for Intel right afterwards. They were like, that was us. We were the ones that did that. They were just... Yeah, I mean, you know, when you do something awesome, you got to immediately take credit for it. And but I was amazed. It was kind of cool. You need to see it. The only funny thing about the Olympic rings, if I saw this correctly, I'm pretty sure I did, there was one drone that was not where it needed to be. Oh. And so it was perfect, except one of them was just kind of off in front of all the other ones. But it was barely noticeable. I was being pretty persnickety when I was looking at it. But we'll just call that drone Jeffrey. It's just like this. It's just this random.
Come on, Jeffrey, get it together.
Get back in line. What are you doing? This is the Olympics. But what was funny is even though they had that mistake, they actually pre-recorded this because they were worried about the wind. So they didn't actually do this live because they were worried that it was going to get messed up, because apparently it's really windy in Korea. But yeah. The last thing I thought was kind of neat is Comcast, and I think another network or cable provider was actually allowing it to be seen in 4K and HDR 24 hours after it airs. So
oh, wow.
We're seeing 4K HDR content for the first time ever. So the most high-tech Olympics I've ever seen. Oh, and
They even have an app or Samsung Gear or something's like doing some kind of VR stuff. So you can actually watch some of the events in VR. So the most high-tech Olympics I have ever seen, blows my mind. Like, just really cool. I love that they went all out on this one. You can definitely tell they wanted someone to be special.
That's definitely really awesome. I mean, it's great to see a lot of the technologies that they've been working on over the past couple of years, seeing that kind of culminate together in one event. I don't know. It can be interesting to see where they are by the next Olympics. You know.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and technology is advancing so fast. I mean, 4 years, I mean, it could be a totally different thing. It could just be androids competing at that point. Just
right.
We're just watching robots fight each other or something. It's a really cool time. It's exciting to see all these new technologies actually being incorporated. Normally, I'm used to seeing like, you know, old media resisting this kind of stuff, and they're totally embraced it, at least for the Olympics. So pretty cool. So that was kind of one of the cool news pieces of the week. This next one is more of a discussion piece. So we can't have a Search for Awesome podcast, apparently, without talking about Casey Neistat. So, because we have every single one. But I do feel like it's merited this time for sure. He had a discussion with a YouTube bigwig, and basically this guy's name is Robert Kinsel, I think is how you say his name. He's the chief business officer of YouTube, and this is a pretty big deal because YouTube has been pretty quiet and like not really wanting to be too vocal about a lot of the changes they've been making. A lot of creators are really bitter with YouTube about a lot of the changes, the demonetization, all this stuff. They're making changes and it's making creators uncomfortable. And the reason why they're making changes is because some of the creators are getting kind of out of line. They're making advertisers uncomfortable because they're posting things they shouldn't be posting. And advertisers are putting their ads on there, not realizing what they're putting their ads on. It's causing this big friction. YouTube's having to just trying to manage this mess. And basically nobody's happy with how it's been handled, except me. Like, I think I understand YouTube's in a hard spot. Like, you're trying to make your advertisers happy, but you're also trying to create this totally free platform where anybody can do anything they want. Like, imagine how difficult that would be to manage.
People tend to forget when they talk about YouTube and they talk about how YouTube's frustrating them or how YouTube's making good decisions or bad decisions. This is a large corporation. You know, there's billions and billions and billions of content creators. I mean, the channels go on and on and on. And then you have several people that have, you know, 5, 6, 8 different types of channels just under them. And to be able to manage all that in a way that makes sense, in a way that actually takes the YouTube community forward, I don't think is an easy job. I don't think that's something to take lightly. This is not, you know, like when you compare this to like TV, which we've done before previously on this podcast. When you compare it to TV, you got to think about it. You've got someone like, say, NBC, where they only have so many different types of shows that they have to manage. They don't have to manage all of cable. They just have to manage the shows that show on their channel, right? But YouTube has basically almost the equivalent of all of cable and then some to manage.
There's way more content to go through. You know, and I understand that a lot of people who are on YouTube have been very vocal and not on board with a lot of the changes that YouTube has been making. But I got to understand they're in a tough spot. But it was really cool to see Casey Neistat finally get to sit down and actually put a face on YouTube. This is a person who is one of the leaders in YouTube and actually has a voice there. And there's really, I'll be honest, although I did enjoy the interview, I'll be honest, I walked away from it not really satisfied with a lot of the answers to the questions, and also not necessarily satisfied just in general. It was a good interview, but I don't think I really learned anything. That's kind of where I landed. But there was 2 interesting things that were said. One thing that Robert, the CBO of YouTube, said is that both YouTubers and the advertisers think that YouTube favors one or the other. Like, advertisers think that YouTubers get all the love from YouTube and like they want to just, you know, really defend the freedom for them to do whatever they want. And then YouTubers think that they're trying to squelch them and take away their freedoms. So it's really, I thought that was a really interesting point. And I bet you that's absolutely true. Is like, it's a hard thing to balance. And I bet you the advertisers feel like that because their ads have been probably put on some videos that they're not really comfortable being put on. And it just happened because of that's how YouTube does it.
And you got to imagine the frustrating position for these advertisers, because you got to think about it like, we have a platform. If we don't like the way things are going, we can make a video right there on YouTube about it. These advertisers can't make an ad to express their frustration. You know what I mean? Like, because that does them no good. They need to make ads that sell their product. So where is their platform to speak out against this? They don't even have that platform to air their grievances over YouTube's decisions. So I guess that's why we don't really even see it that way. We don't see that the advertisers are looking at YouTube like they favor, the content makers, and content makers are seeing each other's frustration. So it seems like it's only one-sided, but when you really look at it, I see where it could go both ways.
Well, you say that, but I'm sure there's these are the people that are funding YouTube, so I'm sure they have the ears of the executives, and that's probably one of the things that, they can't air their grievances to the public, but I'm sure that they get to hear from the if they're a big advertiser, I should say. I bet the small ones can't, but the big ones, I'm sure, can air their grievances.
And that's what I'm referring to. They're not airing it to the public, right? So we're not seeing, in our mind, we're seeing the YouTubers complain, but we're not seeing the advertisers complain. We're just hearing other YouTubers complain and validate our feelings, right, based off of how they feel. And so it's just pushing that home that, they're definitely in favor of the advertisers, because they don't have that public platform like we have, they're feeling the same way. And YouTube's in the middle trying to do the best they can to manage this. It's not easy, because they've got to make it work for everybody, for the YouTubers and for the advertisers.
And I think you hit the nail right on the head, man. They have to make it work for both, because they need both. They can't survive without both. One other interesting thing that Casey brought up, and it didn't really get discussed that much in the video itself, but I want to discuss it now. He brought up that there are no YouTubers that sit at their board table. Here's how he said it, and this is why I thought it was interesting. He said, like, if you go to movie studios, the people, there are people at the top level that have been involved with making movies. You go to the TV studios, same thing. But YouTube, everyone on the top really doesn't know what it's like to be a creator. And so they really don't know how it feels to have some of these decisions made, and how it feels to be powerless sometimes. So I find it really interesting. I thought that was a really interesting point to bring up, because imagine what kind of perspective that, let's say Casey Neistat sat at the table. Imagine what kind of perspective he could bring to the board when they're trying to make a big decision that could impact YouTubers. And he could advocate for them. Maybe they need like a CYO, like a chief YouTuber officer, somebody who's, and again, they don't have to just do what that person says, but it would be good for them to see the perspective. A lot of times it feels like a lot of these decisions are made without anybody who it really impacts, at least in terms of YouTubers at the table.
No, I have to agree. I wonder how much impact, these advertisers have in these meetings, if they can come in and sit in these. That's something I don't know, obviously, but I feel like to have a YouTuber in there, it would have to be somebody that is no longer making that content, because naturally the fear there would be that they're, trying to help make changes in favor of them, not in favor of the community.
That's a good point. The only thing is, I'm sure there's somebody, right? There's got to be somebody that they could probably bring in if they were interested. I just thought it was an interesting point. It would be good to have somebody who actually understands the YouTubers. And again, as a creator, I don't really feel like YouTube's done a bad job personally. I think they have a really challenging task in front of them. And but I do understand the grievances of the creators, that they just feel powerless. They feel like at any point they could just turn off something that impacts their business, and all of a sudden their full-time job just goes poof, or they could make a decision that tanks the platform altogether. All the YouTubers leave, and it leaves a lot of people jobless. So I don't know. I see both sides. It's a tough thing. I'm glad that YouTube actually allowed this interview, because it does show a step in the right direction, that they want to communicate. And that was one of the big messages in the video, is that, for them to succeed, creators have to succeed as well. That our purposes are aligned. So Okay, for the meat of this episode, we're going to be talking about our favorite podcasts that you could be listening to right now instead of this one. Although I would hate for that to happen, but these are some great podcasts, so I couldn't blame you. So we're going to talk about a couple this week, and then we're going to talk about our very favorite ones next week. Let's get started. So the first podcast we're going to talk about Serial. Now, if you know anything about podcasts, you have probably heard of Serial, but I'm just saying it because it really is one of the best podcasts to ever release. In fact, this is the podcast that got podcasts on the map. I believe the host was even on Jimmy Fallon because the podcast got that popular. It followed a guy named Anand Syed. He was convicted of killing his ex-girlfriend, Heyman Lee. But the case and the evidence and so many things were just kind of funky. Like, it really never felt right. And she just basically investigated she investigated this person for several episodes, episode after episode, just bringing new information, new leads, new people. And it was just a wild ride of, did he do it or did he not? So, Mikey, how did you feel about Serial?
So for me, like, that was one of the first few podcasts that I actually listened to. And at first I was kind of skeptical about it, but after listening for a couple episodes, you become enthralled in it. You have to listen to it and listen to what Adnan's saying, listen to what the investigator's saying, and really listen to the stories. But the whole case, you're trying to determine whether Adnan did it or not. I never felt that moment where I understood that the case proved him to be guilty and why he was convicted. It's such an interesting story to listen to, and it really captivates you.
Yeah, it's a interesting story. And yeah, I mean, that was the really interesting to me, is that nothing in the case, like, it's amazing how little it took to get him locked up. Like, there was a lot of circumstantial stuff, but as you guys listen to the podcast, you will get to see that and experience that for yourself. So it's definitely a wild ride. There are definitely some suggestive themes in here, so please, don't listen to it while you have young ears around if you do decide you want to check it out. But it's definitely a really riveting podcast. One thing about Serial is I would say start off with the first season. That's the season where they follow Anand Syed. And if you like it, go to the second season. But I'll be honest, the second season's not as good. There are actually some other podcasts I'd recommend over the second season. One we'll talk about in a second. So yeah, and by the way, it's Serial with an S at the beginning. I thought it was like a bowl of cereal, and that's not right.
So definitely not.
Serial with an S. So one of the things that's cool about Serial is that it inspired a lot of different podcasts after the fact, and one in particular that is me and Mikey's both really high on our list of favorites is Up and Vanished. Mikey, you want to take that one away?
So the thing with Up and Vanished, this one actually draws really close to me, because this is what not only made me want more and more podcasts, but it even got my wife into podcasts. She liked listening to this story and hearing about it. Up and Vanished is about a girl named Tara Grinstead and how she went missing. She was a teacher, and one night she went missing. They never found her body. Basically, this was a cold case for, I can't remember how many years. How many years was it now?
I want to say it's over 10 years, but I'm not 100% sure on the details.
It was a ridiculously long time. Okay, and so Payne Lindsay finds out about this case because he's trying to do a podcast, and he decides that he wants to open up this cold case for Tara Grinstead that basically everybody kind of just let go for the longest time because they couldn't ever find out what happened. They interviewed several people. They, it starts out telling you all this. It starts out telling you the whole case, right? So I won't get into spoilers and into what Payne Lindsay uncovers, right? Because he uncovers a lot of things that become very interesting.
Yeah, he does. He talks to a lot of interesting people.
Yes. But what it starts out with, it starts out with all the usual suspects, the ex-boyfriend, the neighbor, all these different possibilities, the close friend that she last supposedly visited before she disappeared. It goes through all these, but they never actually found any substantial evidence to pinpoint it to anybody. As the story goes on and Payne Lindsay uncovers things, it really just it takes you on this wild ride with an ending that I don't think anybody was prepared for.
No, I don't think so. And
it's
I
so
would say
hard
don't-
not to go into it.
Well, here's what I'll say is don't Google anything about this. If you
Yes,
want to listen
definitely.
to Up and Vanished, just go straight to the podcast and start from episode 1.
Yes, start from the beginning. Please start from the beginning. Don't jump ahead. I'll tell you, for me personally, there were a lot of things that I did skip. I forget what they were called, but there was ones where they did like case files, and it would just talk about different case files or whatever. I typically stuck to more of the actual episodes. I didn't like, there's a bunch of little things, and I think they are for some people, but for me it was a little much. Or they did like question and answers with regular people, and I personally I didn't really care about people's questions because they just had the same questions I had, and I don't know. I don't.
Yeah, because the case files so it wasn't like additional information. They were basically just examining information that they already gave and maybe providing more detail on the information that was already in the episodes. So yeah, I would recommend sticking to the episodes. But if you're like, oh man, like I want more details, go to the other ones.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with that. For me, I never really felt that need because usually, I mean, Payne Lindsay does a really good job at being very thorough and expressing all of his thoughts and what he's come across and what he's uncovered in a way that really kind of opens it up. For me, being a very visual person, I'm a very visual learner. I thought I would have a hard time with podcasts like these because it's just audio. There's no visual. And so usually when I'm listening to things, I have to look up something and I have to see something in front of me to help it make sense. But I feel like he really puts the information out there in a way that you can see it in your head very easily. And it's very comforting.
Yeah, the only thing I will say about Up and Vanished is maybe you start off with Serial first, because Serial is a little more polished than Up and Vanished. Like, especially in the early episodes, you can tell that Payne Lindsay, he was a filmmaker, and he was like a filmmaker turned podcaster. And so you can tell he's still trying to figure things out at the beginning. And they're still good episodes, but I think Serial you could tell these guys were pros. Like they really knew what they were doing. But I will say that even though Serial's more polished and like maybe a better done overall podcast, I prefer the storyline and the storytelling and just the content itself from Up and Vanished more. I actually, of the two, I would say Up and Vanished is my more favorite. But I would start off with Serial if you've never listened to like a murder mystery / whodunit kind of podcast before.
Oh, I mean, yeah, you definitely have to kind of cut Payne Lindsay some slack. I mean, he was definitely out of his element in making this. And he even expresses that a couple times that one, doing a podcast, and two, basically being an investigator. These are things that he had no experience in before doing. And so he's taking on two different job roles and combining them together that he's never done. And there's a lot to be said about that. And as you continue through it and get towards the later episodes, it's really kind of amazing to see how well he actually does at both. I don't know. It's surprising to me.
He comes into his own. And even if you hear his new stuff out now, like his new stuff is really good too. Next up, let's talk about Freakonomics. This is a podcast that's been around for a long time. In fact, this is my very first podcast I ever listened to. And I really enjoy this podcast. At least I definitely did back in the day, and I still enjoy it today. So I watched a documentary on Freakonomics. I think it was on Netflix or something. And it basically is these two guys who just kind of see things differently. And they see it from an economics point of view, and they like start talking about things like why they think that sumo wrestlers cheat and stuff like that, and they look at these statistical evidence to just figure out these really weird things. And I just found the documentary fascinating, and all I want was more. And then I saw they had books, and I was like, I don't actually want to read anything. But then I saw they had a podcast, and I loved their podcast. I just started from episode 1, and I just kept going on and on and on and on. And like, I was just loving this thing. And finally I got to the end, and I had to actually find new podcasts, which is why I have all these other ones now. But this was the only podcast I listened to for a while. Here's a couple of great episodes I'll mention. One was the Dangers of Safety. That's their very first one, by the way. I honestly don't remember that well, but if I remember right, it was a great episode. But I just love that title, The Dangers of Safety. Just really, they just take things and they really spin them and they give you a new perspective. If nothing else, you may not agree with their conclusions, but like it definitely will let you see things from a different point of view. Another one of my favorites is America Ready for a No Lose Lottery? That was a really cool episode. Basically, it was an episode about the idea of, instead of like on your savings account where you get like 0.001 interest or whatever, instead, what happens with this idea that these people have is they take all the interest from all these different savings accounts and they just make prizes and stuff. So it's kind of like a lottery. And the whole idea is to get people to save more money. And it's not something they're doing, but it's an idea that they're trying to present. And but the problem is it's illegal because the lottery industry, which is like a government-run thing, kind of owns the lottery, and they won't let different different institutions have any type of lottery. But it was a really interesting concept, and the whole idea was to make it exciting to save money, which is something people don't do. Another one that I liked was Smarter Kids at $10 a pop, and there's so many great episodes. But I will say their old ones were my favorites. So I would pick one of like the first 50. Maybe you start from episode 1 and work your way up. They do get higher quality as they go. They're more recent episodes, although I do like them. I do go back and listen to them at times. They're more like interviews with interesting peoples. Like they did interviews with CEOs and stuff like that. Instead of it being like their interesting perspective on the world, it's like these other people that I don't know and don't really. They're still good, but it's the old stuff. Definitely the old stuff is my favorite. So definitely check that out. Also, I will say that Freakonomics is a pretty safe podcast, although they do sometimes talk about topics like the black market and things like that they find just interesting, and they want to kind of look at the economic side of it. It's a nerdy podcast, but I really do like it. And just listen to one. I think you'll find it intellectually stimulating. So anyway, as exciting as that sounds, you have the last podcast. Which one would you like to talk about?
All right. So for the last one, this one was actually made by the creators of Serial and This American Life. As we already talked about Serial earlier, and This American Life is another large podcast that has a lot of attention. This podcast, it's got one of the most interesting titles, and I'll warn you before I even bring this one up. This one definitely has very suggestive themes, very foul language. The name of it is S Town. And the S is not for scissors. It's not for syrup. It's not for sugar. It's for explicit nature. But it's
a four-letter word that you've probably heard before.
That I'm sure you've heard. If you haven't, then you'll definitely hear it in this podcast.
Yes.
It's about a guy named John. He despises his Alabama hometown. And I'm taking this straight from their website because it really captures the podcast perfectly. You know, John despises his Alabama hometown and decides to do something about it. So he contacts this reporter, and basically the story that he's given the reporter is that there's been a murder, right? And what the person that murdered this young person is part of a very wealthy family, and so it got brushed under the rug. It starts out with him continuing to push the story, where finally the reporter comes down and he wants to talk to him about it, and he starts investigating this murder and trying to talk to different people and get information. And as he does this, a whole story unfolds, and you find out so much about John's life and all the mysteries that he has. He's an
interesting character. He's very different.
A very quirky and interesting character. He's kind of disturbing, but yet somehow captivating. I don't know what it is. You want to hear more of him and more about him. I don't know why, but he draws you in and makes you really want to come back for each episode. There's 7 total, I believe, and that's it. That's all you get. But they're so good. I don't know. I thought it was a really cool story. If you like Serial, but you're looking for something a little more staged, I think this is definitely a good podcast for you.
Yeah, I definitely liked S Town. One of the things I found interesting about this one is they did like the Netflix model where they just dropped all the episodes at once, and it kind of dominated the iTunes charts for a while. Like literally, it was like, what is the most popular episode of any podcast on iTunes? S Town episode 1. What's the second most popular? S Town episode 2. And then it was like, literally, it was kind of crazy when it first came out. It got really popular really fast. Here's what I'll say about S Town. Although I did enjoy it, I found it interesting. And I'll be honest, it was a really well told story. I think you like it more than I did, mainly because the guy, although he is interesting, he's an interesting character. I just kind of found him a little nuts. And the more you find out about him, the more you're like, even though he's a really smart guy, he's also not exactly a smart guy, if that makes sense. So, and as you said, it's definitely a suggestive podcast. They do talk about a lot of adult themes and stuff like that. But yeah, I definitely would say that's not the first podcast I'd ever listen to because it's a pretty heavy podcast. It takes a lot of twists and turns, and it follows a really interesting story. And where it starts out, it ends completely different. It's just, you don't even know where it's going. It's crazy.
No, I have to agree with you there. If you're the kind of person that can't stand those TV shows where like within each episode there's like 3 different twists and turns, you're probably not going to do well with this podcast. It'll definitely leave more questions than it does answers, pretty much through the entire podcast.
Yeah, for sure. But you know, if you're looking for some other podcast to listen to, check that one out for sure. And I know Mikey really loved it, and I definitely like it, but I have a hard time recommending it personally. Not to poo-poo on your podcast. I'm sorry, Mike.
Hey, I mean, at the end of the day, you can't argue that he'll give you a good laugh. Some of the things he says are just off the wall, and you're like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah, I can't argue with that for sure. All right, that is it for the podcast this week. Next week, we're going to be talking about our 2 very favorite podcasts, and we'll have a couple more honorable mentions. And I hope you guys did enjoy that part. It didn't really feel right having an episode of Search for Awesome without talking at least some kind of tech. Somebody I know showed me something that I thought was really cool, and they had actually a really interesting experience with one of their kids. Basically, his son was needing to find something at a sporting goods store. And there's a very popular one. I don't want to say the name because I think it might get flagged the video. But it's 4 letters and then sporting goods. Actually, 5 letters, I guess, if you think about it. And it starts with a D.
It's apostrophe S. Yeah. I know what you're talking about. Oh, yeah.
D apostrophe.
I think everybody knows at this point.
Yeah. So that sporting goods. So he went to thatword.com trying to get to the sporting goods website. And
I don't think that's the kind of sporting equipment he was looking for.
Nope, not so much. And his son's just like freaking out. He's like, Dad, I don't know what's happening. Like, and so he's like, I need to get something to just monitor my kid's behavior. Not that this kid was looking for this stuff, obviously, but anyway, he just kind of realized that kids can just stumble on things. So Circle is really nice because it allows you to manage your kids' virtual life. Have you heard of Circle, by the way?
I keep seeing advertisements for it, but I feel like it doesn't give me a lot of information for trying to sell me something.
Well,
I feel like it wants to captivate me with its ad, but it's just not really doing it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I don't know.
Well, I haven't seen them because I guess maybe it's weird. It's almost like the internet knows things about you and knows that you have children because I never see Circle ads. But
well, I mean, we could go on and on for that. That's a whole nother subject. But I mean, they definitely cater ads towards you because I guarantee you, like, I get tons of ads all the time for stuff to do with kids or families that I'm quite certain that you don't get not having kids, you know?
Nope. I don't even know what you're talking about, but I am sure I will get them as soon as we have kids one day in the far, far future or near future. Who knows? But I found Circle really interesting because, you know, one day we will have kids and not me and you, but me and my wife.
I mean, don't rule everything out, but I mean, that's fine.
Yeah. But it's $100. And so basically it allows you to see everything your kids are watching, experiencing, what apps they're using, allows you to set bedtimes. It allows you to tell them which apps they can use, which apps they cannot. And it's really cool. I mean, there was a lot of things you can do, and as they grow up and they get older, you can allow them more things. Like for his youngest, he doesn't allow them to get on Facebook, and it'll actually and also you get to see like their web history. You get to see what kind of stuff they've run across. It also they also have like a Go version, which because this one the regular Circle is just for your house. You like plug it into your wireless router, and it's basically like a doorman for whenever they're hooked up to the Wi-Fi there. And you just tell it this device belongs to this child, and this device belongs to me, and this one belongs to my wife, and this person has restrictions. And you can set like time limits and stuff. But it's really cool the way it's set up. It has a really slick interface. It's really easy to use from what it looks like, and but it's really nice because you can just really get an idea of their kids' digital life. And I'm thinking like when I was a kid, like if the internet was as prominent as it is now, like and it was existed, but it wasn't as prominent.
Yeah.
Like I didn't have a phone or anything like that when I was 8, but now kids do, and this is a way for you to just kind of see what's going on in their digital life. I just thought it was really neat. If nothing else, it just lets you know what they're doing. You don't even have to put parental controls on there if you don't want to. But there's also, they have a Go version that basically is an app that you download on the phone. I think that one does have a monthly fee. The regular Circle does not. And basically it will actually restrict what they can do on their phone on the go as well. So even if they're at a friend's house or whatever, it can still lock it down. And if they somehow disable it, it'll send you a notification saying, hey, Timmy just disabled the Go app or whatever. Anyway, what do you think about that, man? Do you think that's something you guys might be interested in?
That sounds pretty cool. I mean, I looked at something similar to do with like Google Wi-Fi because one of my coworkers told me about that. And basically what appeals to me there is, you get mesh network, and then you can also have some of the same controls. But having a device that focuses solely on that does kind of sound appealing. It sounds pretty neat to have, because it's kind of like TVs. Once you start including smart TVs and stuff like that, like it'll work great, right? But like it's not going to be as good as if you actually get, a 4K player or whatever. So I'm wondering, if getting a Circle versus just relying on whatever a regular router can offer me, I wonder if that would actually be better off because it's more focused and geared towards just doing that job. Because it's definitely something crucial. My oldest is 9 years old now, and he's all in the world of YouTube and watching videos and just browsing the internet and just seeing what the world has to offer, and which is great. I want him to do. I want him to explore, but I don't want him to just get lost out there and come across things that he's not even trying to search for. I mean, like you said, just trying to go to a sporting goods site. He just wanted to go, look at baseballs and gloves and stuff. And here he is, and found himself in a compromising situation that he didn't know what to do and why, for what. I feel like that is something that could be very beneficial to have to be able to just block that content and not tempt them with something that they're not already tempted with.
Okay, we have a little bit of a confession. After last week, we made a big deal about our new awesome mics and new setups.
Time out. You say we have a little bit of confession. Let's point the finger where it really lies here. Okay. Go ahead.
No, it's your fault. Yeah, you did this. No, I was listening to the audio when I was doing the podcast, and even though I liked the quality from the mics, one thing I noticed is that your mic sounded a lot different than mine. Like mine sounded like super warm, and yours sounded like really clear and crisp. And although I liked both sounds, I also wanted them to be consistent. And the other thing I noticed is on your end, you're in a room that's really echoey. And we just needed something, or we didn't need, obviously, this is not a need, but we wanted to just change things out to make it where, that get a mic that fits what we're doing. So there's a lot of advantages to these new mics that we got. And so this is the SM57, and what's on top of it is called the Shure A81WS. This is actually apparently the exact mic setup with this windscreen that the White House uses, apparently. That's what I heard. And what really brought me to these is because I found a video where somebody compared them to an SM7B, which an SM7B is like the radio standard for mics, but it's $400. We were not about to buy these mics, is basically what I say.
That's quite the investment.
Yeah, especially for a hobby podcast, but these are a fourth the price, and I was like, this actually seems to be pretty good. So we have new mics. These are the SM57s again, and some people said online that we should have went with the SM58s, which are very similar mics to these. But what brought me to them is I listened to it compared to an SM7B, and they sounded so similar. And SM7B are the gold standards. All the pros mainly use them. And then we got these huge foam things because it'll remove the plosives and make our voice not so like it won't mess up. It does a good job of removing those. When you want to say pandas, it won't have that popping sound. If you've ever heard that before, it's very obnoxious. So that's why we have these little things too.
Well, I mean, I'd like to point out a couple of things here. One, first of all, I mean, we were talking about this, and I was like, why don't we get the 58? That's 4 vocals. The 57 is supposed to be more for like instruments, right? It's supposed to be direct audio. And
that's what people use them for.
Well, and I got that, but when you think about it, when you're trying to do a podcast, you're not moving around, you're not singing, where it's trying to capture all the audio coming from you as you move around the microphone. Mm-hmm. You're sitting still. You're directional. You're one directional into the microphone, and that's it. And so you need that one direction. You want to keep from getting the audio from around you, and that's what I think this mic will excel in compared to the 58. Not only that, probably the coolest thing you told me about this is these are the same microphones that the White House uses. And a lot of people don't realize, when they hear the president speak, it sounds so clear and crisp, and it sounds like there's no noise going on in the room. But if you ask anybody who's ever been in those rooms or in those type of situations, it's actually pretty loud in there. They're not sitting there quietly. You've got people working. You've got people doing all kinds of stuff. It's actually a very kind of loud environment.
I'm not sure they use them indoors. I think they actually use these outside, and the windscreen's for the actual wind, I think. I don't know. I mean, the picture I saw was outside, but yeah, they'd be great.
One of the
either.
pictures I saw actually had these. It looked like inside as well.
Oh, really? Okay, cool.
I'm not sure, but either way, I mean, inside, outside, it always sounds clear and crisp. And they could easily, I mean, we're talking about the government here. They could easily buy the $400 microphone or $3,000 microphone. We're not talking about somebody that's short on a budget here. So the fact that they use them, to me, it kind of speaks volumes.
Yeah, it does. It literally speaks volumes. But sorry, stupid joke.
Right?
Is that even a joke?
Even mean to.
What is that?
I literally didn't even mean to. Like that. That was completely natural. I don't know. I guess it's the inner dad joke in me.
And one of the things one of the things I will mention is that's what's nice about getting an audio interface that plugs in through USB or whatever, is if you decide the mic that you're using isn't good for what you're trying to use it for, then switch out the mic and you have an audio interface, and it works with. They only have so many USB mics out there in the world, but there are tons of mics, regular mics that you can use, and this converts that signal to be used on your computer for podcast or whatever else you're trying to do. So. Definitely loving the Behringer audio interface that we are using. We'll have links to all the stuff in the comments. But I think these MXL 770s, although I still think they're really good microphones, I just don't think they were really good for what we were trying to do.
Yeah, I have to agree.
All right, so we got some questions and comments. Actually, not really. Oh, no, there is one question, actually. This is from Abby Layton. He says, hi, or she says, hi. I assume Abby's a she. Hi there. I was wondering what camera you were filming with when you do the POV shot of the camera looking down. The quality looks so great. I found this really interesting. She sent this 2 days ago. This is actually on a really old video of mine. It was on a video I did about an action cam. And the shot she's talking about is like the overhead shot. So you could see, I had shots where it was like me with holding the camera or whatever. But then I also had shots from above, and she's asking what camera that was. And that actually, I'm almost positive it was my phone. I didn't actually use any fancy cameras for it. It was just my phone. Or what people don't understand is that like the biggest and most important thing about getting good video or like good photos is the light. If there is good light, that's when it's going to make the video pop. That's why, like, when people are like, I really want to have a camera that's got really good low light. It's like, it doesn't, like, okay, low light's great to have, like, if the camera can do it, but, like, that's not really the optimal conditions. You're not going to get the best image quality, no matter what the camera in low light. So, I just thought that was funny. So, it's just my phone. That was what that was recorded with.
That's pretty funny. I think I remember you mentioning that at the time, that you didn't have anything to really get that shot very well, and you ended up using your phone, and it actually worked out pretty well.
Yeah. And it was funny. I think even at that time I had a 1080p camera and my phone was 4K. The only problem is like it had a 10-minute limit, so like I'd have to keep stopping and starting it. So it was kind of a pain to do that. But Juan Carlos Castillo Disla says, I prefer the optical viewfinder over digital because it makes it less of you doing the job and more of the camera doing the job. Back in the day with film, it was all on you, and that's why I preferred to do that. So this is somebody who's talking about, it was comment on one of my camera videos to put into perspective. And so there's the optical viewfinder, so the thing you can look through to take pictures, and then there's like the screen, or actually on mirrorless cameras, which is the camera I'm using right now is a mirrorless camera. It actually has a digital viewfinder. Anyway, it's kind of all complex, but basically what he's saying is he wants he wants his photos to be harder to make. He or she, I'm not sure. That's basically what they're saying. Like he or she does not like the fact that things are getting easier, I guess. I don't know. I do appreciate doing things the old-fashioned way, and basically what's happened is like cameras have gotten better and better and better. So now like when you look through the viewfinder on like this camera, you can see exactly what it's recording. But on like DSLRs, like my Canon camera, if you look through it, you take the picture, like what you see through the picture is like you're just seeing through the lens, but then you take the picture and then after that you see what the picture looks like. So it might be darker or brighter than how it looked through the lens. It's kind of weird.
You hear a lot of people talk about the way it used to be, and people took great pictures doing it this way. And I mean, I agree, but the thing is they did great with what they had because that's all that they had. I don't see a problem with embracing technology, and having these same, creators. Like if you had some of the photographers, from 30, 40 years ago, and gave them the technology that they have today, and just imagine what they could do with that. Just imagine how much more they could blow you away. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know. I get wanting to do it the old-fashioned way because that's the way it was done before, but I feel like there's nothing wrong with progress. I don't see why we can't have a world where there's both.
Yeah, why not both? And well, here's my thing. There's always going to be an old-fashioned way of doing it. Like I bet you when photo cameras came out, people were like, I draw. Like I do sketches. That's how I do things. That's the better way of doing it. Those
wicked machines. I paint.
Yeah, or like even before that, like whatever it was before that, we just do caveman drawing. Obviously I'm exaggerating a little bit, but there's always an older way to do things. What's wrong with progress? What's wrong with making things a little easier on the creator? And in this case, like for YouTube, one of the things I've been trying to do a lot of is just trying to make things simpler, because I do have a full-time job. And the more time I spend on making videos means the less videos I can make. So if I can make things more efficient and better, why not do that? And I prefer a digital viewfinder because even though it's not as clear looking through it, you're getting to see exactly what it's going to look like when it's final. After you hit that record button or you take the picture, you get to see what it's going to look like at that point. With an optical one, you just don't know until you hit the button. Like you really don't know. And it's like, at least I'm not a professional photographer. I'm sure there's more to it than that. And I'm sure professional photographers prefer them for some reason, but why not make it easier?
Think back to like those like point and shoot cameras we used to, you'd buy them from the Walgreens or whatever. And you just take it and you just look through the little window and you take your picture, having no clue what it's going to look like if it was way too low of light or whatever. So you go and you have these pictures, printed off.
Oh, yeah.
And you look at them, and some of them like you have no clue what it is because it's completely dark or it's just a bad angle and it just doesn't make any sense. And so I'll never forget how many pictures I wasted just having no clue what I was doing. Versus now, like on my phone, like I can pull it out and I can look on my screen and see what I'm actually taking a picture of and what that's going to look like when I snap it. So there's no confusion. There's no just mystery there. I don't know. Maybe I'm
thinking too low key here, but
No, I think you make a great point. I mean, that's one reason why, like, I think people, the average person can now take a great picture because technology is making it possible. But if the bar that you had to get over to take a great picture was, I have to buy this very expensive film camera, I have to, take the picture, and I really don't know what I took. I have to go to one of those dark rooms to process it and all this stuff. Like, people just aren't going to do that, but technology's made all this stuff a lot easier. So I do have respect for people who are willing to do things the old way. And, and sometimes I'm sure there are some advantages to doing the old way, but I have to disagree with this commenter that that's the better way of doing it. Or at least, well, it may be the better way for them. But for me, like, I'm good with progress. Let's make things better. Let's make things easier. Let's make things faster. Let's make things stronger. There's nothing wrong with progress. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. And I guess we will see you guys in the next one.
See you next week.